Hey, everybody. Welcome to this month's Ask Adam Plus. It is the month of January. We've been talking during the month about the names of God. We're in a new theme for the main episode on foundations. So if you have any questions regarding those, please, not the names of God, because that's already been done, but salvation, that's next month.
Yeah.
Send us your questions regarding salvation. But this particular podcast is Ask Adam Plus, where we get to ask Pastor Adam any kind of question we want. And one of the first questions we're just going to jump right in is from Izzy, who says, why are there no crosses in the church?
Yeah, well, this came up over the Christmas holiday. Izzy is my son-in-law.
Yeah.
And he just said, hey, I have a question for Ask Adam. And I said, oh, okay, what's that? And he said, why are there no church crosses in our church?
We're not the only church.
So my
that
wife
doesn't have them.
overheard it because I even said, you have to ask my interior decorator. Never me. My wife, Michelle. And so Michelle goes, no, there are. And then she goes, well, we have a giant Jesus statue. We have emblems, doves, eagles all over. But there's our emblem of the bridge itself is crosses. It's like a suspension bridge. But I know what Izzy was talking about. So we told the media guys, and between lyrics of the song, the scriptures, you're going to see a lot more crosses on our screens. So.
Well, I always, and you were raised Catholic. I always wondered why on the Catholic crosses is Jesus still being crucified?
Yeah, that's a crucifixion.
Do they have other do they use other crosses?
Very around their neck are usually for a rosary cross. There's others, yes, but mainly almost all Catholic churches, the emblem of the church will be Jesus on the cross.
Is it Episcopalian or Protestant where we've removed Jesus? Like, we don't use any crosses with Jesus on the
right.
cross.
Almost all evangelical churches have taken Jesus off the cross. In my opinion, thankfully.
Mm-hmm.
But Paul himself even says that because it drives me crazy that people say, and I know there is really no debate about this, but the first emblems of Christianity, the only one that's still around is the fish. The dove would come about 300 or 400 years later, but others have been lost. The pelican, the anchor, the pitchfork pointed towards heaven. There was others, but the cross, I think, was early on. And if you could look it up, it'll say like 4th century. Probably after the reign of Constantine in Rome, that the cross became, like, at least in the Western church, the emblem of Christianity. And I don't buy that, because Paul himself writes in Galatians that the message of the cross is foolish. That implies something twofold. Number one, the cross was being used, and it was being used in messaging, either as emblems or as a logo. And Paul did not write in the 4th century AD. Paul wrote in the mid to the second half of the 1st century. So I do believe it is important. Our bad, Izzy. You're going to see more of them.
Good. The next question. This is from a new person who has submitted, and his name is Brandon Garcia.
Okay.
It came in via the website, and he writes, hello, Pastor Adam and Pastor Jessica. Great job with the podcast. It's very informative and a great way to learn about the Bible through questions that myself and others might have. And I have a lot of questions, believe me. He says, I appreciate what you do. I'll just keep it to one question today. In Genesis 4:14, Cain slayed his brother Abel, and he says to God, it shall come to pass that everyone that finds me shall slay me. Who is everyone that he is referring to? Isn't Cain, Abel, Adam, and Eve the only ones mentioned in the Bible to that point? I noticed that in Genesis, more and more people start to show up. Where did they come from? If you've already answered this question before on the podcast, I apologize, but I look forward to hearing more podcasts from you in the upcoming year.
All right, Brandon, good question. Not that particular scripture, but this whole concept has come up. And the theory is, of course, it actually has a name. So, Brandon, look this one up. It's called the pre-Adamic, like Adam, my name, Adamic theory. Nowhere does the Bible say that there's only 4 people on the planet Earth. We just interpret it that. It never states that. It also states that Eden was a place within a place, because it says in Eden there was a garden. Well, the garden is placed in Eden. So, and it also says that there was flaming swords and angels on all the entrances. Well, was that to keep them in, or was that to keep something out? That's a great question.
And it never speaks of destroying it. So some people theorize that it's still here somewhere.
Somewhere buried, perhaps, right? And when Cain slays Abel, God exiles him to a city. Who are these people, Brandon? I think the city's called Nod, N-O-D. Mm-hmm. And it says that Cain and his wife. Who's she? Mm-hmm. I mean, if they're the only 4, then Christian Mingle probably didn't have a lot of people, probably wasn't a lot of choices. So the theory is that, was Adam and Eve truly the first man and the woman, or were they the first man and the woman to have a relationship with God? Mm-hmm. I think you can make an argument for both sides on that, Brandon. But I personally, and I don't like to get into this on Sundays because, again, people just have the traditional view of whatever. And if you go up against that, people have a tendency to balk. And on Sundays, it's not my goal to make people scratch their head or to wonder. Maybe on a Wednesday night, and certainly on this podcast, food for thought. So I would not preach that. But personally, I do believe in the pre-Adamic theory that there was human beings, not spirit-led, not spirit-filled, no relationship with God, roaming the earth. And these were the ones, and obviously there was a lot of danger around them because Cain doesn't think, oh, that's great. I love these people. They're almost isolated from them. And maybe like in his mind, they're kind of like boogeyman. But then God said, no one will harm you because I put a mark on you. Again, that'd be another good question. What was the mark?
Maybe that mark was
the mark of Cain.
Yeah.
Right? So yes, Brandon. So look that up. I'm not saying buy it, and I'm not here to talk you out of it. I'm not here to condone it, and I'm not here to even prop it up. It just is out there as a theory.
So what is
Adamic theory?
Is there a name for the other? If you don't accept or if you don't receive that pre-Adamic theory, is it just
they're called creationists?
So it's just creationists.
It's the creationist theory.
Well,
again, these are all theories. We won't know all the details.
I mean, it would seem to make sense simply from the standpoint. To me, it makes sense because you've got the Bible, kind of casually mentioning the Nephilim that come down and have children with the humans. The fact that God Himself says He regrets having made mankind, you would think that maybe that's not God's man, God's chosen person that God's speaking of.
If Moses' goal for writing Genesis, especially the first parts up until like when we have Abraham, if his goal was to write a science book, I don't think he succeeded very well because he leaves too much out. And in science, if you leave too much out, it whittles down your work. Mm-hmm. Right?
Right.
So if that wasn't the goal of Genesis, then what was the goal of Genesis? To me, he's trying to start a story that man had everything with God that man could have wanted. He's being provided for. He's being protected. Mm-hmm. He's being cared for. He even has relationship with God in the cool of the day. That gets lost. And I believe Moses is trying to tell the story. It's a love story. It's a love that was lost in a garden. Mm-hmm. And how do we somehow get that love back and that relationship back and that right standing back with God? The older I get, Brandon, the more I try to start reading it, not as a science book per se. I'm not discounting it. I'm just saying I read it more as almost like a broken-hearted love story, the beginning of it. Good news is, get to the New Testament, and God's man will be back in a garden. His name is Jesus after the resurrection, with a woman. This time her name is Mary Magdalene. And I believe, in essence, that John's story is trying to show us. We are back in the garden.
And speaking of the garden, Stephen wrote in and asked you, where was the Garden of Eden, and has any archaeological digs confirmed the location?
Well, this has been in the news lately because a couple of these, not National Geographic, but other societies that fund digs and expeditions is actually starting a Garden of Eden dig. So I know it's been on the news a little, but in a weird way, the region is probably known, at least within about 170 square miles, which sounds like a pinpoint, and on a globe it is a very small area, but in reality, it's a huge area, right? And the Bible gives very explicit clues to where it was at. Right? He says between the four rivers, two of which are no longer in existence, which of course are the Pishon and the Gihon. But then the other two aren't still in existence, the Tigris and the Euphrates. So if you can find the confluence of the tributaries of these four major rivers, then you're in the ballpark, according to the writing of Moses. But here's the problem. What are you looking for? Will there be any human ruins? Does it say Adam and Eve built anything? Right? It almost implies it was natural, and when they departed, it was natural. So how can you pinpoint if it was never human civilizationalized or built upon? What are you trying to dig to find to verify it's
well,
you're chasing ghosts?
Isn't it like that, the fountain of youth? Wouldn't people be looking for the tree of the lasting life when you're looking for Eden? Is that what people would be looking for?
Well, when you dig in the ground, you're looking for pottery.
Right.
You're looking for coins. You're looking for man-made structures that aren't natural, rock upon rock. If you find leather or wood and you know that they were put there, that's exciting in that field. You're not going to find any of that.
Mm-mm.
Adam and Eve had no need to print coins. It never says they made pottery. Maybe they did, but how would you be able to identify it, right? Never says they built anything. First building project pretty much mentioned in the Bible is the Tower of Babel, which is not in the same location. So you could use all the LiDAR, sonar, all these things that are hot right now in the field of archaeology. But my question would be, what are you trying to find that would pinpoint it? I don't think anything exists.
In reference to lost things, the next question that we have is from Taylor, and Taylor is saying the lost years of Jesus refer to which years? What is Taylor referring to with the lost years of Jesus? Yeah,
this and every about 5 years, there's always a new documentary on this because it is. I'll admit, it is fascinating. Taylor, I believe,
Mm-hmm.
Taylor. All right, Taylor. Here's the fascination of it. We know a lot about Jesus's birth and probably up to about the age of 2, if you read the Gospel of Matthew. That's good. Then we get glimpses, and we have one little account, and I believe he's up to the age of 12. Okay?
Right.
But from that account in Luke to the start of his ministry, he's age 30. Those are the lost years of Jesus, traditionally, from the age of 12 to 30, which is a pretty good time span, let's be honest. And a lot can happen in a 12 or 13-year time span. The Bible gives us nothing in reference to these years.
And maybe you know a lot more about this than I do, but I've heard that according to Jewish custom, you're not considered an adult until you're 30. That is what I've heard.
No, a man in high ranking. You're a man at your bar mitzvah, which is 12 or 13.
Okay.
Which the story that Jesus is 12 and lost in the temple.
Right.
Some scholars believe it was his bar mitzvah.
That is bar mitzvah.
Perhaps.
It
very well could be.
There's rules.
But he couldn't be a rabbi. He couldn't be a magistrate of a city or like what we would call a mayor or hold a political office. Because a man at 30 is trustworthy. He's settled down. He has a family. He's not living for himself in theory. He's making decisions based on others for the good of community or his family or what have you. But from 12 to 30, the Bible gives us nothing. So, of course, when we have nothing about a known historical figure, Jesus isn't the only one. There's, the lost years of Julius Caesar. We know from about the age of 15 when he's kidnapped by pirates and even tells them, "I will hunt you down." I mean, but from there until he's a major magistrate, probably in his late 20s, these are these lost years, right? And a lot of these historical figures throughout antiquity. In other words, unless there is a chronicled piece about a particular time period, you can say it about Alexander. You can. It's not as big of a time spell as Jesus, but it's tantalizing, is my point. So, of course, not only modern writers, but writers throughout, during from the first century on, have been tantalized by this idea. What did Jesus do? What was he taught? Who did he follow for this 13-year time period? And only thing the Bible, I think it does give a few clues. Number one, it does say that he was a carpenter. So he would have had to learn
the trade,
woodworking in some way, shape, or form. We see him speaking Greek. So, but being a carpenter, probably for business and for making bids and quotes and what have you. Especially, it said he was around this area called Decapolis. Well, decade, these 10 cities, these are mostly Gentiles. He's probably learning that. But other than that, nothing. So, of course, you have many Gnostic stories about Jesus. Most famous, of course, that he traveled to India and he learned under, I don't know how a little poor boy from Nazareth is going to get his way 3,000 miles east, but who knows? And that he learned things because when he teaches, there are glimpses of earlier ancient writings from the sub-Indian continent. But I don't know. It's all speculation, but it is kind of fascinating. The Gospel of Thomas talks about these years, that he was a miracle worker during these years. But then if you line that up with what the Gospels say, if he was a miracle worker, why wasn't he much more accepted in his own hometown? It almost implies, the Gospels, I'm saying, that he did very little in this capacity. Wasn't recognized as a rabbi or somebody that set their eyes. Once he starts teaching, he's recognized as a rabbi. But leading up to that point, they almost seem shocked. They seemed like, they even say, "Isn't this the carpenter?" On one gospel, the carpenter's son, doing these things. So it kind of blows them out of the water. So I have a hard time believing he was in massive training of being being tutored by some great.
It almost seems like, in the very beginning of Jesus's birth, they're traveling. Joseph and Mary are traveling. It seems like when he's 12, they're traveling. It almost paints a picture of this family that maybe they're selling their carpentry or fixing things, or they're traveling, and he's getting to know all of these places that he one day will go and witness to. And maybe he's not a stranger when he arrives for the first time because he's been traveling, and they're not opposed to traveling. It seems like they're traveling the entire time.
I had a Bible college professor once say Jesus seemed to have had, for lack of a better term, a little bit of a gypsy spirit.
Yeah.
He's always on the move.
Yeah.
Right? If he truly was studying during the lost years to be a rabbi, then he's looking for a permanent location.
Mm-hmm.
Either to set up a school to teach young men or a synagogue that he is going to be in charge of one day. Again, permanent locations. Jesus seems to be zero interest in having a permanent location. In fact, if you wanted to find, I always laugh, how many times did people set off to go, let's go hear the preacher, and they went to the wrong hillside, or they went to the wrong side of the lake, or, you had to.
He's in the room.
He's always moving.
In the room.
In him we live and move and have his being. In essence, Jesus' life was that way.
Yeah.
He was always on the move.
Yeah. That's a good sermon. That's a good life lesson right there. Always being on the move. Speaking of Jesus, the next question came in through online. is the second coming of Jesus at the time of the rapture, or is the second coming when he reigns on earth for 1,000 years?
Well, you're asking, the answer to this will make people upset because, well, you don't really know, but all these doctrines have been written about this. If you read all the Left Behind books, then the rapture happens first and then tribulation. You can look these up. You can look up pre-tribulation theory, mid-tribulation theory, post-tribulation theory. So look them all up, read what you can on each of the three, and then you make up your own mind on which one you think. I'll be honest, I've kind of varied over the years about this. I've had other preachers talk to me about, Jesus kept talking about what fruit falls and what fruit remains. We always talk about the falling being caught up as the good thing. Maybe it's the opposite, right? Which is an interesting perspective because every time Jesus mentions falling and what remains, being remaining is good, right? But if you've studied the rapture theory, being remaining is not good. So
no.
I've tweaked my thinking in this, but whoever the online question is, nobody truly knows. And if you notice, you sat in churches, most churches don't even preach whatever theory they kind of believe because it's too convoluted.
Controversial.
It's way too, and it divides people.
Opinionated is what I should say.
Yeah, and everybody has an idea on how they were raised or brought up, or when they first got saved, it was taught this way, and they're going to stick with it. I'm not saying it's wrong. All I do know is the one prophecy in the Bible that is still yet unfulfilled is his return. He is returning.
Amen.
Is it before all the trouble? I don't know. I hope so. I'm kind of a softie when it comes to trouble. I'm open. Is it in the middle of it? Because he wants to see what fruit remains. Again, his words, not mine, and what fruit falls. Okay. Or is it after all of the mark of the beast? Is it after all of this? Is that my point is I'm gonna try to keep myself ready regardless.
Amen. The next question we have is from Carlos, and he asks, if Jesus truly, quote, knew all, then that would mean that he would know Judas would betray him. So why keep him in the disciples and on the team?
Great question, Carlos. I'm glad you asked that. So Carlos's question, numerous times, especially in the Gospel of John, I think 3 or 4 times it says, for Jesus knew the thoughts and the intents of all men. Or Jesus knew what was going to happen. And so we kind of build this theory of that he knew everything. All right, well, let's say it's true. Let's say he did, I could push back on it by saying, well, then why is Jesus surprised, shocked, and amazed as many? But anyway, for the sake of the argument and Carlos's question, let's just say, yes, he knew. You could not trick Jesus. You could not pull one over on Jesus. He knew what your thoughts and your intents were. Well, if that's true, then it's certainly one of his closest guys he would have known the thoughts and the intents of as well. So let's say he did know that. Why would he not have removed Judas? Well, Carlos, I need you to expand your mind a little bit. What if, I'm going to pose a question back to you. What if Jesus did know this and did know he would betray him? But what if that was all Jesus' plan? Right? Leviticus says that there's nothing holier than the Levite who accepts the lamb from a family. This is Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. And nothing is holier than that lamb being led to the slaughter by a holy man. Now, granted, I'm not trying to make Judas into a holy man, but didn't Judas actually serve the same role that the high priest did every Yom Kippur? In essence, he took our holy lamb, mine and yours, Jessica, you out there listening if you're a believer, and he brought the holy lamb to the place of the slaughter. I'm not applauding what he did, but also I don't make Judas to be such a horrible villain like he has been portrayed for 2,000 plus years.
Well, I mean, just the term with it to Judas, the point of death.
Just the term Judas means traitor,
yeah.
Right? If you're talking to somebody and somebody says, "Oh, that person's a Judas," I mean, no, that's not a compliment.
No.
Right? But really what he did, couldn't you argue again, Carlos, expand your mind. Couldn't an argument be made that none of the other 11 of the 12 disciples did something as holy, in essence, as bringing the lamb to the slaughter?
You're making my mind blown at the point, because I'd never thought about it from that point of view. And I'm also now just thinking about the fact that he betrays him with a kiss, just like a shepherd would, I'm sure, love it, or the priest would lovingly pet or take care of the lamb to prepare it for the slaughter.
What's the last thing Jesus ever says to the man? Friend, why are you here?
Yeah.
Calls him friend.
Yeah.
If he knows all, this isn't a shock what's happening to Jesus. It's almost like Jesus' final farewell to him is, no matter what you did to me, you are my friend.
Yeah.
Right?
I know you have to do
and
what
then
you
he's
have to
so
do.
distraught. He takes the money back. Right? It's almost like the enormity of the situation. And there is a separate theory, Carlos, that for 30 pieces of silver, in fact, just Google 30 pieces of silver. It's not only in the Gospels. There's numerous references in the Old Testament as well. It's really what would have to have been paid for somebody who's crazy or somebody that needs to be exiled. So it almost implies, did Judas think what he was doing would not take Jesus to the point of death, but it would take Jesus to be exiled? So what if we were exiled back to the Galilee? Well, that's where all the good times were. That's where the big crowds were. That's where all the excitement was. And I'm doing him a favor. And then when he realizes he was betrayed, the betrayer was betrayed, he realizes what the Sanhedrin want to do with Jesus. It's not exile him, or it's to exile him out of living to dead. And that's why he is so distraught. If all he wanted was the money, which is how he's been portrayed for 20 centuries, then why did he throw it back at their feet? If it was to get out of this lifestyle and go back to living his own life that he had prior, why did he commit suicide? To me, of the 12, Judas is one of the most complex figures.
Do you think that there was at some point, do you think Judas would have thought, if he is who he says he is, then he's going to get himself out of this situation? He's going to take himself off the cross, or he's going to rescue himself?
I don't know if Judas did or not, because Judas takes himself out first. He left the scene too soon.
Yeah.
But I believe Thomas thought that for sure, because Thomas asked Jesus, or says to the others, unless I see the gash in his side, I shall not believe. Well, a gash in the side is not one of the wounds of the cross. The gash in the side was taken by a Roman soldier to see if Jesus was still living or dead. He would have only known that wound existed unless he was watching.
That was the final wound to prove that Christ actually died
on the cross.
Versus having
and when he saw that,
off.
His faith died with that wound in the side. So, yes, I do believe Thomas. So he's probably not the only one. Many of them probably, it says they all ran, but I think they ran far enough or close enough, I should say, to the scene that they were watching.
So perhaps part of the depression that you feel that they felt after he was entombed was the letdown that they felt that he had not.
Yeah, here's a man that had conquered everything they had seen. Hunger.
Yeah.
He's feeding 5,000. Nature. He's calming the seas. He's talking to the winds. He's walking on water. I mean, I can go on and on and on. Right? Demons trembling. But think of the things they had seen. So granted, as horrible as a Roman execution was facing them, they had to think this was in his power as well. They just misunderstood it. So I do believe for a 3-day period, their faith was completely gone.
Crushed.
Their hope was crushed, and it was dead.
Yeah.
And then if that's the case, to see him alive again is the ultimate. You got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
He did conquer it, just not the way they thought.
The next question, and back on the cross, is from Charles asking, why vinegar on the cross? Vinegar can have a stimulant effect like smelling salt. Wouldn't something else be better?
That's a good question. And I have heard this bandied about too from a lot of skeptics about the story, that this is a flaw in the story because vinegar, he's right. Charles is right. Vinegar was almost always used as either a cleansing, like in a wound. It can be a stimulant. In fact, you put it under your tongue to this very day, apple cider vinegar. You're supposed to get a little. So that's that it's implausible that they would use vinegar on the cross. Well, interesting, in the Gospel of Mark, it doesn't say that. It says it was vinegar with myrrh, which is a tree bark, which would have been a drug.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus does not take it according to the Gospel of Mark. He
Hmm.
refuses it. And so to me, it's like, so were they giving it to him? So if it truly is a stimulant, like Charles is saying, are they even being more cruel?
Mm.
The pain will be even more intensified, this horrible experience you had? I don't buy that. Some people teach that, but I don't buy that. I think Mark gives the greatest clue to it, because the myrrh would have dulled,
Like a painkiller.
in essence, would have helped with the pain. Right. Not keeping him alive. It's not speeding up his death. It would have just dulled him to that point. So it's not just vinegar, Charles. It's vinegar with myrrh. And vinegar is a stimulant because it opens up your blood vessels. But the myrrh, now that your blood vessels are open, is bringing the numbing to it quicker.
Okay, so if myrrh was traditionally used as a painkiller, why did they bring it to Jesus?
Because it had great value. It's acacia tree
expensive.
Bark. Yes, but it's also what you were to use on a body. It had a fragrant smell. It could last for days. It was to prepare a body for burial throughout not only the Middle East, but parts of Asia and even parts of Europe. So, yes, it would have had great value. It would have, and the more you kept it, the more value it would have gone up, almost like wine. The aromatics changed over time. So, a very costly gift. But if you ingest it, it is a strong numbing agent.
Maybe some of that myrrh was held back from when he was born.
Wow.
That was mixed with the... Just saying.
I'm
saying there's no biblical proof of that, but I'm just thinking maybe Mary kept a little vial from his birth.
I would have thought she would have kept a lot of things from that time.
Yeah.
And she outlived him, remember, too. The last time we read about her is in Acts chapter 2, that she's part of the 120 in the upper room. So, in tradition, say she would. So I've always been a little fascinated. You women are, you collect photos, collect the kids' as kindergarten projects, you collect a lot of things.
Yep. Scrapbooking.
She would have had to have, you would have thought.
Yeah. So the next question is from Barbara, and she asks, why don't Christians follow kosher eating like Jews?
Well, that's being bandied about too, because there seems to be a strong movement, especially in the United States, that we need to be a little more Jewish in our faith. I kind of balk at that. To me, the ministry of Paul was this subject.
Centurions.
That, number one, Jesus himself said during communion that this is a new covenant, right? He also says, I came to fulfill the law, okay? Which would imply the law has been either fulfilled and we have a new agreement, a new covenant with God. Well, if that's the case, what's the old covenant? Right? And if the law is over or fulfilled, what is the old law regarding food? Well, it's, go to the book of Leviticus, there's chapters on it. And of course, this is where we get kosher preparation and kosher foods. And I know a lot of Christians in America are going back to the kosher foods. However, let's be honest, Paul writes numerous things. And even Peter himself, upon Simon the tanner's roof, when he gets the vision of non-kosher foods being, and the voice from heaven says, rise.
Bacon is falling from the sky.
Yeah, rise, kill, and eat. And he even says, no, my lips have not touched anything unclean. And God 3 times tells him, what I have now cleansed, do not call unclean. Yeah. And Paul writes in Romans 14, chapter 20 to 22, that all foods can be eaten. I'm paraphrasing here. The only thing he says is consider the weaker brethren. In other words, right? If somebody's devoutly following Jewish kosher eating habits, then don't serve them crab, right?
Yeah.
Or lobster or pork and all the other non-kosher foods. So consider them. But all foods are acceptable for Christians to eat. Later, it would say, except those that have been prepared for idols, whose blood is being worshipped, these types of criteria. Other than that, if it's edible, go ahead and eat it. God has cleansed it all.
Well, and I had always interpreted it, and you being in our last episode, you talked about the fact that you've been to all these different countries and you got to travel. It seems like if we were to limit ourselves based on our religion, that also limits our ability to witness to other people that haven't heard yet of Jesus.
Well, let's be honest. When you meet a new culture, almost isn't food going to be served?
First thing. Come to my home.
First, and it's important to them.
Mm-hmm.
My first time to India, we were told we were going to get picked up and taken. We were going to show the Jesus film back in the early 90s. And I said, well, how far is it? Is it close drive? And they're all, yeah, not very far. It's like 2.5 hours. I'm like, oh, yeah. And it's a village out there. Well, these people had made a banquet for us. What was in that banquet? I have no clue to this day. But was I going to offend them
by
not partaking or turning my nose up at something? I had one serving of just about everything because my presence there, or the team's presence there, was, I don't know, you can tell it was a big deal to these people. So you're right. So part of cultural expansionism of sharing ideals and ideas, obviously, is always over food. And let's be honest. What is a church? Well, according to the book of Acts, it was believers coming together house to house and the breaking of bread. So it is important. But I serve a God who has cleansed it all. And I say, hallelujah, thank you, Jesus, regarding all of it. I might go have a ham sandwich tonight in honor of what God has done.
Yeah. Our last question for this episode, and the reason why I saved it, because it is a little bit, it's out of what we've been talking about. It's more of a principle. The question comes from my daughter, Madeline, another new question, and she asks, what is your definition of gossip? How is it different than, say, processing with a friend or going through life together? Because the Bible's very clear, Paul's very clear on gossip and the sin of gossiping, but yet what makes gossip and not just sharing or even, heaven forbid, a prayer request for somebody else's benefit?
No, it's a great question, Matto. And last few times I went to pastors' conferences, I remember leaving a few lunches thinking, was that a gossip session?
Wait, what just happened?
I sat down trying to get updated on individuals or folks or movements, and it does bleed into, let's be honest. My definition, the way I was brought up, was if you're talking about somebody and you do not know all the facts or circumstances, and if you continually keep talking about that individual, that's gossip, right? Because you're sharing opinions or perspectives.
You're filling in the blanks.
And exactly, as you've now taken over this role as the storyteller. It's almost like in Kings where it says so-and-so was a good king and so-and-so was a bad king. Well, you learn that right up the front. I don't like that. I know it's in the Bible, but I'd rather read about the individual and make my own opinion, right?
Right.
Here, we're in essence saying she did this or he does that or blah, 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 blah. And we don't know the true facts, but we are passing judgment in one way, shape, or form. Then that is gossip. If somebody's sitting there going, hey, the so-and-so you went to Bible college with, well, they started a church in San Diego and they got it going and blah, 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 blah. To me, that's not gossip. I'm getting updated.
Right.
But if we start talking about the character of an individual or their faults or what they're wrestling with, and really we're not praying for them or we're offering no help, then the way I was brought up, that's gossip.
Yeah. And when we were talking about it, we were talking about like any time that you're filling in the blanks, or if you just find, and clearly if they're not there in the room to interject and tell you what really is going on.
You're missing this part of the story,
then,
right?
Then should we even be talking about that person unless they've specifically said, hey, could you pray for me, or could you guys come together and pray for me when I'm not around? And this is why.
I have a buddy out in Stockton, Pastor Mark Filkey, and there's a few times at lunches I've heard him say, all right, you know what? I'm going to call that guy tomorrow, and I'm going to tell him I'm praying for him, believing for him.
Yeah.
And I know in a way that's his subtle way of this conversation's kind of bleeding into an area that, is it really productive?
Yeah.
Talking about this. So, and that's always kind of stuck with me. And I that's a nice little guide. And I don't know. I don't want to be gossiped about, and I certainly don't want to be gossiping about somebody else. Really, what purpose does it serve? Maybe this is why Jesus says, judge not, because it's hard not to gossip without judging a person's actions or their deeds or their character, or their kids or their lot, whatever. And really,
And when Paul's writing about it at that time, there really was no other way of getting the good news out but by word of mouth. And so I'm sure he was also attempting to say, hey, let's keep our yeses being yeses and our no's being no's, because the only way that we have to share information is what we're going to be sharing with one another, and we need to keep it tight. We need to keep it clean.
No, kind of like Dragnet. Just state the facts, just the facts, ma'am.
Yeah.
And it's hard. I think there was a little season of my life that I had a little gossiping in my sermons. I don't really know the full extent, or I'm lumping all Muslims together, or other faiths together, or Hindu, whatever. And I don't really know the particulars of it, but I'm just kind of lumping. And I remember thinking, unless I, state the facts, Adam.
Yeah.
If you don't know the facts, then give people food for thought, or give people a perspective that maybe stretches them out a little bit. But when we could be a little holier with what comes out of our mouth. But let's be honest, sometimes good gossip is so hard to walk away from.
Yeah.
Hey, all right, how many times you sat in hey, have you heard about so-and-so?
What? Tell me.
Yeah. You're going to have a seat.
Yeah.
You might even order a coffee because we're going to be here a little bit. And but it's not productive, and stay away from it.
Yeah. Well, we hope on this episode, as with all of the Ask Adams that you've heard in the past and the ones to come, that you have gotten some good facts. Thank you, Pastor Adam, for sharing your knowledge with us and for answering these questions so candidly with your opinions. We really appreciate them each and every time.
Well, it's good to be back. 24 is going to be a good year. I don't know about you, Jessica, but I'm excited for it. And get your questions in. Yeah. We love wrestling with them.
Yeah. Thank you for sending in and submitting your questions. Have a fantastic 2024. More for 24. Whatever it is you're believing God for, believe bigger, speak cleaner.
Yeah. No more gossiping.
No more gossiping. Unless you're sharing about listening to Ask Adam.
That's right. Get the word out.
Have an awesome rest of your day, everyone. And we'll see you next month, in the month of February, when we talk about salvation and whatever else it is that you would like to talk about. Bye-bye.